The sun dropped low over the ancient grasslands, washing the savannah in a golden hue as the wind whispered through the acacia trees. A pale orange dust cloud stirred in the distance, antelopes on a run. But it wasn't a herd that made the Oru clan uneasy. It was the silence that followed. Every bird had stopped singing. In the thick grove near the dried creek, Aina crouched with her knees pressed to her chest, eyes darting toward her mother. Soma, with hair matted from days without washing, held her youngest child tightly to her hip. Aina, though only in her 10th season, was already growing tall, her gaze sharper than most of the others. Beside her, Karu, a wiry boy with a scratch across his cheek, tightened his grip on a crooked stick they found earlier. Then it came. A low, thunderous growl rumbled through the trees, vibrating the ground beneath their calloused feet. The sabertooth. The clan didn't scream. They didn't run. They knew better. Running meant dying. Jallo, Aina's father and the group's strongest male, grunted once, a deep guttural sound, and the entire band moved as one. Aina clambered up the nearest tree, her fingers slipping slightly on the rough bark before finding a steady groove. One by one, they vanished into branches like ghosts of bark and breath. In the distance, twigs snapped. Dry grass crunched. The predator was near. From her perch, Aina could see between thick leaves. Her heart thudded, echoing in her ears. Below, a massive form passed, muscled shoulders, a wide jaw, and those impossibly long fangs. It moved with deadly grace, sniffing the air, eyes scanning for the slow, the careless, the unlucky. Time passed in aching silence. Eventually, the saber-tooth moved on. Only when the sky turned from gold to purple did Jallo descend first, tapping the trunk to signal safety. One by one, the clan dropped from the trees like cautious shadows. Aina was the last to touch ground, her feet landing quietly on soft moss. "We stay here tonight," Soma murmured, brushing dust from Aina's back. "The dark is hungry." They gathered near a cluster of broad-leaved plants. No fire, no words, just a circle of bodies pressed together for warmth. The young suckled, the old dozed, and Aina, still wide-eyed, stared up at the sky, watching stars blink through the branches. She wondered what they meant. She had no words for it, but in her bones she knew the world was vast, dangerous, and waiting to be understood. By dawn, the air was crisp. Birds had resumed their chatter, and insects buzzed near damp soil. Koru poked at Aina's side until she swatted him away. They were close, more like twins and cousins, and often wandered together in search of fruit or roots. They followed a path near the creek bed, now cracked and brittle, signs of the dry season creeping in. A few baboons screeched in the distance, and the two paused, scanning for leopards. "Quiet," Aina said, her voice more vibration than speech. She pointed to the red berries growing low along a sunlit rock. Koru nodded and tiptoed forward, plucking one. He sniffed, chewed, and then nodded again. Safe. As they gathered more, Aina spotted something strange, a shape half buried in sand. She knelt. It was a skull, smooth and pale, not animal. Not exactly. She'd seen one like it before. An old death. She touched its hollow eye sockets, feeling the absence of life. For a moment, it felt like the earth itself was watching her back. That afternoon, the clan feasted on the berries. Not much, but enough to stave off hunger. Aina sat close to her father, who sharpened a stick with a jagged shell. He wasn't a talker. No one was really, but Jallo's silence carried weight. Aina mimicked him, trying to scrape a branch the same way. Her hands fumbled. The bark tore unevenly, but she kept trying. Suddenly, a howl echoed from the east. A chorus of it, hyenas. The Oru clan stilled. They knew the sound well. Scavengers, but dangerous in packs. Soma lifted the baby. Koru armed himself with a stick. Jallo rose and sniffed the wind, but the sounds faded. No approach, just warning. Still, fear lingered like smoke. That night, Aina dreamt of running, not from beasts, but towards something. In her dream, she found a lake so vast the sky floated inside it. In the center stood a creature like herself, only taller, stronger, glowing with light. It handed her a stone. sharp and smooth, and whisper in a language she did not understand. When she awoke, the air was colder, and her mind was different. She didn't tell anyone. But from that day on, Aina looked at the world not just to survive it, but to study it, to challenge it. As the sun rose once more over Pliocene wilds, the Oru clan moved again, shadows against the golden earth, unaware that in their midst, a new spark had been born, not of fire, but thought. The spark that would, one day, shape the future of humankind. The dry season tightened its grip on the land like a clenched fist. The once bubbling creek where the Oru clan drank had withered to a narrow line of cracked earth. The mud at its center dried to powder. Morning mist no longer rolled in from the trees, and the birds, those that remained, sang with caution, not joy. Aina rose with the first gray light. Her limbs ached from sleeping on knotted roots, but her eyes were sharp, alert. She stretched beside Soma, who was still curled protectively around the baby. A few steps away, Koru squatted, poking at an ant trail with the charred end of a stick. The clan's bellies were nearly empty. 2 days had passed since their last full meal, berries and a few scavenged tubers. Jallo stood silently, watching the horizon. His expression, like always, gave away nothing, but Aina saw the tension in his shoulders. Without a word, Koru grabbed his stick and nodded toward Aina. She understood. Time to forage. The plain stretched wide before them, dotted with scrub and sharp thorns. Thorn trees stood like sentinels, twisted and dry. The grass crackled beneath their feet. They moved low, instinctively, ears twitching, eyes darting. Every motion came from generations of caution. Death often waited beneath the grass. Koru, Aina hissed, pointing. Near a fallen acacia, a cluster of baobab fruit swelled in the sun. The thick-skinned pods were high above ground, but one, just one, had dropped, lying cracked in the dust. Sweet pulp glistened inside. The two hurried forward. Koru crouched to retrieve the prize, but as his fingers touched the pod, a low hiss broke the silence. Aina saw it before he did. A python, coiled near the base of the tree, almost invisible against the bark. Koru froze. His eyes went wide, then slowly backed away. But the snake struck. Not far enough to bite, but close enough to graze the stick he carried, knocking it from his hand. He yelped and stumbled. Aina moved without thought. She scooped up a rock, flat, wide, and hurled it toward the reptile. It missed, but the motion startled it just enough. The python retreated under the leaves, coiling tighter around its lair. Koru scrambled backward, his breath heaving, dust in his throat. Aina grabbed his arm and dragged him away. They didn't stop until they reached a patch of tall grass where they dropped to their knees, panting. For a while, neither spoke. Then Koru laughed, a sharp, breathless sound. "You missed." Aina scowled, but couldn't help smiling. It moved. He rolled his eyes and fell back against the earth. "Still hungry?" She nodded, then stood. "Come." They wandered farther than usual, past the termite hills and rocky ridges where leopards sometimes slept. The heat pulsed down on them like a hammer, but Aina felt something pulling her. A memory of the dream, a direction she couldn't name. At the edge of a stony slope, they found a shaded grove hidden behind tall elephant grass. Here, the air was cooler. The trees bore strange leaves, thick, oval, and deeply green. Beneath them, a small pool shimmered. Not deep, but clear. Around its edges grew waterberries, sweet and pale. Aina knelt and dipped her fingers in the water. Cool. Safe. She drank, then cupped her palms to offer Koru a share. They gorged on berries until their bellies stopped aching. Then they rested in the shade, watching lizards dart between rocks. A butterfly landed on Koru's arm. He grinned. "This," he whispered, "is ours." They returned to the clan with stained hands and juice around their mouths. Jallo raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Soma looked relieved. The others gathered around as Aina led them back to the hidden grove. By sundown, the Oru clan drank deeply and ate well for the first time in days. That night, they slept closer together. Aina lay awake, staring at the stars. She thought of the snake, of the pool, of the way her body had moved when danger came. She hadn't planned it, It had just happened. But what if she had planned? What if she could learn to act before danger struck? What if they didn't always have to run? The next morning, Aina returned to the place where Koru had dropped the stick. The python was gone. She found the flat rock she'd thrown and picked it up. It fit her palm perfectly. Smooth edge, weighty. She tested its sharpness on a stalk of grass. It sliced. Not cleanly, but enough. Aina squatted and began gathering stones. She compared them. Some were useless. Others cracked easily. One had a jagged edge that resembled the tooth of a hyena. That one she kept. By the time the sun stood high overhead, Aina had a small pile. She didn't know what she was doing, not yet, but something told her this was important. Nearby, Koru watched, chewing on a root. Why stones? Aina didn't answer. Instead, she struck two together. They chipped. One left a shard sharper than the rest. She picked it up. Because they remember, she said softly. Koru blinked. Stones don't think. But Aina wasn't so sure. That evening, Jallo watched her from a distance. He said nothing as she arranged her stone pile near the edge of the camp. Soma looked concerned, but didn't stop her. Only the youngest, a girl named Luma, sat beside Aina with wide eyes and curious fingers. Show me. Luma whispered. Aina smiled. For the first time, knowledge passed not through instinct, but through intention. Days passed. The grove had become a lifeline, with its shaded waterhole and fruit-bearing trees. The Oru clan thrived, by their standards at least. Bellies were less hollow, limbs moved with less effort, and laughter, even if brief, returned in the form of playful nudges and shared glances. But the earth was changing. The wind grew hot, even in the morning. Leaves curled from their stems. Insects burrowed deeper into soil. A sky once dotted with birds now lay empty. The dry season had turned from cruel to merciless. Aina felt it first in the silence of the grove. The water pool shrank daily, its edges crawling inward like frightened fingers. One morning, she bent to drink and saw only damp earth. When she dug deeper, mud came up, thick and sour, not drinkable. She looked up. Jallo had seen it too. The clan stood behind him, quiet, waiting. They knew what this meant. It was time to move. They headed west. Following Jallo's lead, Aina and Koru walked near the front, scouting with sharper eyes than before. Luma clung to Aina's side, watching her every move, mimicking the way she crouched low before hills or sniffed the air near dry shrubs. They walked past cracked plains, where no grass grew, only dust. Dead trees clawed the sky like forgotten bones. Once, they found a giraffe carcass, its skin pulled tight over empty ribs. Aina turned Luma away before she could look. Midday heat blistered their backs. By dusk, they reached a slope overlooking a sunken valley. Below lay a large dried lake bed. Pale salt, patches glistened like glass. In the center, abundant trees. Life, but it wasn't empty. Another clan had beaten them there. Aina saw the smoke first, not from fire, but from burning grass, likely set by lightning or heat. The rival clan, leaner and darker, moved like shadows among the trees. Their eyes watched from a distance, hollow and unwelcoming. Jallo raised one hand, not a threat, but a signal of peace. The others remained still, waiting. A woman stepped forward from the rival clan. She was tall, her hair twisted in coils, her arms scarred with old burns. She said nothing. She simply pointed to the trees behind her. Her territory. Koru murmured, "We should leave." But hunger made the Oru hesitate. The land they left behind was dying. They needed food, shelter, water. The first fight was not planned. It came like a crack of thunder. A boy from the rival clan threw a stone. It struck Oba, one of Aina's uncles, just below the eye. Oba roared and lunged. In an instant, bodies clashed. No tools, just fists, sticks, and teeth. Aina stood frozen. Blood splashed across dry leaves. Screams, some animal, some human, pierced the dusk. Soma dragged Aina back. Run. But Aina didn't run. She watched. Jallo pulled Oba away. The rival clan melted back into the shadows. One of their own limping, another bleeding from the shoulder. The Oru clan gathered their injured and turned away, defeated, humiliated, shaken. They moved north instead. No one spoke. That night, they camped beneath a ridge. Oba's eye had swollen shut. The others huddled in shame. Aina sat alone, carving lines into the dirt with sharp stone. Karoo joined her. Why did they fight? Aina shrugged. Because we wanted what they had. Karoo tilted his head. But they didn't make the lake. Or the trees. No, Aina said softly. But they found it first. The sky cracked the next evening. It began with wind, strong, hot, furious. Dust swirled into the air. The clouds gathered like smoke above a battlefield. Then lightning. Forks of white fire streaked across the sky, stabbing the earth in flashes. Thunder shook the ground. Animals cried out in fear. The Oru clan crouched low, arms over heads, eyes squeezed shut. Then came the smell. Burning. Aina opened her eyes. The plains were on fire. It started from the east, a long line of flame, fed by dry grass and wind. It moved quickly, too quickly to outrun on foot. Jallo shouted. He grabbed Luma and barked orders with his hands. The clan began to flee westward toward a rocky incline. Aina reached for Soma, who clutched the baby and ran. Smoke poured into the sky, thick and choking. Aina's eyes stung. Her lungs burned, but she ran. Behind them, fire roared, a living thing with hunger and rage. They reached the stone caves just before the flames caught them. The entrance was narrow, shielded by boulders. Smoke swirled at the edge but did not enter. The clan huddled inside. No one spoke. No one moved. Outside, the sky glowed red. Flames danced across the plains like wild spirits. Trees exploded. Animals screamed. The world smelled of ash and fear. Aina sat with her arms wrapped around Luma. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from something else. A thought. The fire destroyed, but also revealed. When the flames died, the next morning showed a blackened world. Ash coated the ground like snow. Trees stood charred and hollow. But something else remained. Bones. Tracks carcasses. Prey animals too slow to escape. And where animals had fallen, meat remained. Jallo stepped forward, cautious. He pulled at a half-burnt antelope leg, the flesh cooked by fire. Aina crouched beside him. The scent, strong and unfamiliar, made her gag, then salivate. Her hand reached out. She took a bite. Smoky, soft, different. She looked up at Jallo. He nodded. That evening, the Oru clan ate their first warm meat. No fire of their own. No tools. Just remnants of nature's fury. But for Aina, the lesson was clear. Fire was not just death. It could also be transformation. The world after the fire was quieter. Ash coated everything, the grass, the trees, even the clan skin. The Oru moved carefully, navigating the blackened terrain like ghosts walking to the bones of the old world. Birds had fled. Predators were gone, too, for the moment. Only the scent of smoke and the distant hum of wind remained. But for the first time in moons, the Oru clan was full. Their bellies swelled with cooked meat from the carcasses left behind. Though no one had made the fire, its destruction had become their salvation. And for Aina, it was something more. It was a teacher. She crouched near the charred rib of a zebra, staring at the split bone. It had cracked clean from heat, the marrow inside soft and warm. She tasted it and was surprised. Not bitter. Sweet. Rich. Life-giving. Jallo watched from nearby. He said nothing, but his eyes stayed fixed on her for longer than usual. That night, as the clan rested in a new patch of green, just beginning to regrow from the ashes, Aina took her stones from her pouch and sat beside a flat rock. Luma crept up next to her, small hands sticky from fruit. "Tell me," Luma whispered. Aina lifted a round stone and struck it against a sharper one. A flake broke off, thin and pointed. She picked it up carefully, turning it in her hand. "It cuts," she said softly. "Better than bark." Luma leaned in. "Like claw." Aina nodded. "But ours." By the next morning, Aina had shaped 3 small flakes. One she tied to a stick with dry grass. The others she kept in her pouch. The Oru watched her from a distance, not fearful, but unsure. These were tools unlike any they'd seen. Not found. Made. Later, when Jallo returned with scavenged monkey limb, Aina used her flake to peel back skin. It worked faster than her fingers. Cleaner, too. The others watched in awe. She handed the tool to Karoo, who tested it. He sliced the hide with ease and grinned. From that moment, Aina's place in the clan shifted. She was no longer just a girl who found water or berries. She was the one who listened to stone. In the days that followed, Aina began observing more than just tools. She listened to sounds, bird calls, insect rhythms, monkey screeches. She noticed that certain cries always meant danger. A high-pitched trill meant eagle. A low whoop meant ground predator. One morning, when the wind was cool and soft, Aina heard a cluster of warning calls from the treetops. She froze. Karoo, nearby, didn't understand. What? Aina signaled silence, pointing upward. Then a rustle. A leopard burst from the brush. The Oru scattered, shrieking. But because of Aina's warning, no one was hurt. They climbed into trees, waited until the predators slinked away, and returned to ground only after the monkeys began to call calmly again. That evening, Jallo placed a piece of antelope meat in front of Aina before taking his own. For the Oru, that meant respect. Aina began experimenting. She mimicked monkey calls. Not perfectly, but close enough. When she did, birds scattered. Monkeys looked confused. Karoo laughed so hard once he nearly fell from a tree. But it was working. Communication, rudimentary, uneven, was beginning to form between her and the land itself. One day, she carved marks in the bark, scratches, circles, lines. She didn't know why. Something inside her demanded she remember. Not just live. Remember. She showed Luma how to use a flake to strip roots. The young girl mimicked the motion, then passed the tool to another child. Within days, even the elders had tried it. Aina realized something profound. Skills could move from body to body, without waiting for instinct or blood. A thought could leap between minds. It was Karoo who pushed this further. He had watched Aina for days, and began testing things himself. One morning, he rubbed a sharp flake against dry bark until bark curled into shreds. Then, he struck two stones together, mimicking Aina's tool-making technique. But this time harder, faster. A spark jumped. Tiny, fleeting, but real. They both gasped. The second strike gave nothing, nor the third. But Aina's mind burned brighter than any ember. If she could shape a blade from stone, could she shape fire? Not just find it, not just fear it, make it. The days became warmer again, and the clan moved toward a rocky basin where wind was low and shelter was abundant. Game trails crossed here, and water pooled in carved earth after brief rains. The Oru had no name for it, but they had found a territory, a place they could return to. And in that place, Aina began her most important experiment. She gathered bark, dry leaves, twigs. She rubbed, struck, failed, again. Her fingers bled. Karoo mocked her, then joined her. They failed together. Until one morning, when the wind paused and the light was just right, a single thread of smoke rose from the tinder. Then glow, then flame. It died quickly, but not before Aina saw it. They had made fire. She didn't tell the clan yet. Not until she was sure. That night, she dreamed again of the glowing creature from seasons ago. Taller, older, wiser. But this time it bowed to her, placing a flame in her open hand. She woke with tears on her cheeks. The sky was dark, but her mind was lit. The sun rose weakly that morning, veiled behind streaks of gray cloud. The air carried a strange dampness, neither rain nor mist, but something heavier, like the earth itself exhaling. The Oru clan had settled in the rocky basin for several days, feeding on roots, small animals, and what little fruit remained on scattered trees. Their tools, sharpened flakes and wooden spears, were becoming more common in their daily life. But something still hunted them. Aina sensed it as she crouched by the water's edge, scooping up handfuls to drink. The stillness, the silence of birds. the distant rustle of dry leaves too deliberate to be wind. She stood and scanned the tree line. "Koru!" she called softly. No answer. "Koru!" She dropped her water and bolted up the trail, leading toward the ridge. The path was narrow, framed by shrubs and thorns. She climbed faster, ignoring the sting of brambles on her arms. Then movement. She found Koru half-slumped behind a boulder, blood trickling from his leg. A deep gash opened just below the knee. The skin split wide like a cracked fruit. He grimaced. "Wild dog." I didn't hear it till it bit. Aina crouched beside him, heart pounding. She glanced at the dirt, paw prints, long claws, erratic paths. Not a pack, thankfully. Just one. Still dangerous. Koru was pale. Sweat glistened on his forehead. He tried to rise, stumbled, and cried out in pain. "We need to go," she said. "I can't walk." Aina looked around, breath quickening. The sun was dipping, and the shadows grew teeth. She couldn't carry him back, not all the way. Then she remembered the hollow tree. It stood not far from the trail. A massive baobab split down the center, its trunk hollowed by years of rot and weather. Aina had passed it once during a foraging trip, thinking it dead, but now it felt like a gift. She helped Koru lean on her shoulder and half-dragged him toward the tree. Each step left a smear of blood. He winced with every shift. They reached the baobab just as night began to fall. Inside, it was cool, damp, and wide enough for two to lie side by side. Aina gathered dry grass and laid it beneath him. Then she removed a leather pouch at her waist, opening it to reveal sharpened flakes, bark shreds, and a twisted strip of vine. She tore cloth from her wrap, pressed it to the wound, and tied it with shaking hands. Koru's breathing slowed. "I thought I would die," he whispered. "You still might," she muttered, but her hand stayed on his. They spent the night in silence, broken only by the distant cries of hyenas and the low thrum of frogs. Aina didn't sleep. She sat with her back to the tree wall, staring at the stars through the crack in the trunk. And she thought, why had she come back for him? The old way, the instinct, would have left Koru behind. The weak fell, the strong moved on. It was nature, but something had changed. Aina felt it in her bones. A new law, deeper than instinct. One that said, no one is left behind. By dawn, Koru's fever had risen. Aina placed a wet cloth on his head, then crept outside to find herbs. She didn't know what would help, but remembered a cluster of red-stem leaves her mother once chewed when her stomach burned. She returned with a bundle, crushed them between stones, and pressed the pulp against the wound. Koru flinched but said nothing. She fed him water in small sips, wiped his face, replaced the bandage. As the days passed, he spoke less, but the fever broke. And when he finally opened his eyes, clearer than before, Aina smiled. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to rest. 3 days later, Jallo found them. He had followed the blood trail. At first, his face was unreadable. Then he looked down at the wound, the healing bandage, the stone flakes arranged nearby. He grunted, not in anger, but in approval. He bent low and lifted Koru, slinging him across his back with strength that defied his years. Aina followed in silence. When they returned to the clan, the others circled in awe. Koru's survival was near miraculous. No one had expected him to live, let alone return walking. Luma ran forward and touched the bandage. Then she looked at Aina and whispered, "You fought death." But Aina shook her head. "No, I waited with him. And that was harder. That night, under a sky shimmering with stars, Jallo motioned for Aina to sit before the fire, a small one, made from dry bark and bark shavings. Not loud, not proud, but warm. He handed her a piece of dried meat, not as a father, but as a leader passing honor. "You stayed," he said. It was the first time she had heard him speak in moons. Aina nodded, speechless. "From now on," Jallo said, "no Oru leaves another behind." The hollow tree became sacred. The clan returned to it often, sometimes for shelter, other times to leave marks on its inner wall. Aina carved a spiral. Koru left a jagged X. Luma pressed a palm in wet ash and printed it there. It became memory. A place that said, "We were here. We mattered. We survived." And from that tree, stories began. Not spoken yet, but told in scratches, gestures, and looks passed between generations. The hollow tree whispered back, its walls full of shadows and hope. It was no longer just a tree. It was the beginning of ritual. The rains returned late that season, soft at first, then wild. They swept across the plains in sheets, filling dry beds, stirring the air with the scent of wet earth and rebirth. Plants sprang up seemingly overnight, green shoots piercing ash-covered soil. With them came insects, then birds, then prey animals in cautious numbers. The Oru clan, though weathered and bruised, had endured. They had fire now, small, smoky, but theirs, and they had tools, sharpened and taught from hand to hand. But perhaps most importantly, they had stories of the saber-tooth of the firestorm, of the hollow tree. Still, something was missing. Jallo had vanished 3 nights earlier. He had left silently, as was his way, venturing alone toward the west in search of new paths and bigger herds. Aina had watched him disappear into the dusk, her stomach twisting, not from fear, but from uncertainty. Jallo had always returned, but this time he did not the first night, nor the second. By the third, whispers stirred the clan. Soma stood with arms crossed, lips tight. "If he has not returned by dawn," said Oba, "we must move on." Aina looked toward the horizon. "No," she said. "He is dead." Oba snapped. "He was old, even the strongest." "He is not dead," Aina said sharply, more certain than she expected. The sky darkened early that evening. Storm clouds gathered, low and heavy. Rain would fall again, perhaps harder. The clan prepared their shelters, pulling branches together, laying skins across their sleeping hollows. But Aina stood watch, and just before the first drops fell, he came. He limped into camp, his frame soaked, his shoulder torn and hastily wrapped with strips of fur. In his right hand, he carried a charred femur bone. His hair was matted, eyes hollow, but he was alive. Soma gasped. Luma screamed with joy. Koru ran forward and caught Jallo before he collapsed. The fire crackled low as they circled him, offering meat, water, dry cloth. But Jallo said nothing at first. He stared into the flames like one who had glimpsed something no one else had. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "I found the place of smoke." Aina's breath caught. "The volcano?" He nodded slowly. "Far, beyond the Red Ridge. The land there is broken, but it burns. Fire comes from the earth itself. It spits stone and heat. The ground rumbles beneath your feet." The clan murmured in awe. "But that's not all," Jallo continued, lifting the charred bone. "Animals die from the smoke, fall where they stand. The ground is black, but the meat is warm. No chasing, no trap." Oba frowned. "Too dangerous." "Not always," Jallo rasped. "When the wind shifts, it clears, and what it leaves behind feeds many." He turned to Aina, eyes sharp again. "You were right. Fire does more than kill. It prepares." That night, the clan sat close, eyes wide as Jallo recounted what he had seen. Molten rivers of red rock, trees that burned without touch, birds that fell from the sky mid-flight, but also soft ground filled with edible roots and pools so hot they steamed. Aina sat beside the fire, holding the charred bone in her hands. It was blackened on one side, cracked on the other, and as she studied it, a thought bloomed. What they could bring fire, not from the sky or the earth, but from their own hands. She had seen sparks before, felt warmth, cooked meat, but what if they could carry fire? The next morning, she tested it. She took a branch, thick and dry, and placed its tip into the fire. When it began to glow orange, she held it out. The flame danced, alive, untouchable, but did not die. She walked slowly, breath held, toward a distant shelter. With each step, smoke curled behind her. Luma ran ahead, pointing. Aina has the sun on a stick. The clan gathered. Aina bent low, pressed a fire-tipped branch into a nest of bark and moss. She breathed. Smoke, heat, then flame, They gasped. Koru clapped, his hands covered in ash. Now fire listens to us. Days later, the aura began moving again, north this time, toward the greener hills Jallo remembered from before the firestorm. But now, they carried fire with them like a companion, in clay bowls, in burning branches, in Aina's eyes. They no longer feared the night. They shaped it, but change breed challenge. As they camped near a cliffside stream, two unfamiliar figures appeared at the edge of the trees. Another clan, taller, lean, darker-skinned, with hair knotted high. One of them carried a spear tipped with obsidian, smooth, black, and sharper than bone. The clan stared at each other in tense silence. Then Aina stepped forward. She knelt and placed a burning branch between them. The strangers did not speak, but they watched it. One reached forward gently and placed his palm near the heat. Then he smiled. He pointed to his chest. Olu. Then to his companion. Nari. Names. Aina touched her own chest. Aina. The fire had spoken, not in words, but in warmth, in power, in peace. That night, the two clans sat near the same fire. They shared roots, meat, and stone tools. Luma danced. Koru laughed. Jallo watched with tired pride. Aina sat at the fire's edge, holding the charred bone once more. She thought of the volcano, of Jallo's journey, of the sparks Koru had struck by accident, of the stories carved into the hollow tree, of tools passed from hand to hand, of pain held in silence, of care that stitched wounds. She understood, at last, fire was not just warmth. It was memory. It was future. And the ones who carried it would carry the world forward. The sun rose over the hills like an ancient drumbeat, slow, warm, and heavy with meaning. Mist clung to the grasslands, and birdsong returned to the trees. The Oru clan, now larger and stronger, began their morning as they always did. With silence, with motion, with the rituals born of survival. But everything was different. They carried tools shaped by thought. They ate food kissed by flame. They slept near fires they had built with their own hands. They no longer wandered with only fear and instinct. They walked forward, with memory, with meaning, with hope. And Aina stood at the edge of the basin, watching the horizon, her heart beating in rhythm with the wind. She had become more than hunter or gatherer. She was story keeper, tool shaper, flame bringer. But now, she was also mother. Her son, Obu, was bold and fast, barely 6 seasons old, but already daring enough to sneak from camp and climb low trees. His questions were endless, his fingers always reaching for something. A beetle, a bone, a stone that looked like a tooth. He had his father's quiet strength and Aina's restless mind. That morning, he ran to her holding something wrapped in bark. "Look," he said. Aina crouched. Inside was a smooth stone, almost glassy, black as night. Obsidian, like the spear tip carried by the strangers from the other clan. "Where?" she asked. "The river bend." Obi said, "There's more. Lots." She nodded slowly. "Good. Show Koru. Teach him how you found it." Obi grinned and dashed off. Koru, now older and scarred for his injury, was a teacher himself. He trained younger members in tool use, in walking silently, in listening for signs the land whispered. He had grown into a leader, but always deferred to Aina, because she had brought fire. That evening, the two clans lit fires side by side. No longer strangers. They now traded flint for food, fibers for fishhooks. A shared language had begun to form. Not with words, but with gestures, shared routines, firelight, and trust. The children played together. The elders carved symbols into bark. The women tied strips of leather into bracelets, marking seasons, births, and journeys. And in the center, always, burned the fire. Aina sat beside Jallo that night. His hands were rougher now, slower. His back curved with time, and his legs stiffened with each moon. "They don't remember the sabertooth," he said softly. Aina followed his gaze. The children laughed as Obi mimicked a baboon, puffing his cheeks and hopping in circles. "No," Aina replied, "but they remember the heat, the hunger, the fight." Jallo nodded. "We were bones once." Now we are more. The next morning, a scout returned from the hills. There's a group, he said breathlessly. North, near the red stones. They are many. Oba tensed. Hostile. The scout shook his head. Hungry. Alone. Aina stood. Then we bring them here. That week, the Or made their greatest journey yet. They gathered food, water, tools, and fire. A burning branch was carried in a hollowed-out gourd lined with moss and ash. It glowed faintly through the journey, kept alive by breath and care. Obi walked beside it the whole way, hands cupped over the opening, whispering to it like a friend. When they reached the strangers, a ragged clan with sunken eyes and wounded limbs, no words were needed. Aina stepped forward, placed a fire between them, and waited. A woman limped forward, old and thin, with scars on her cheek like tree bark. She knelt, touched the flame, and wept. That night, under a shared moon, 3 clans sat together, and the fire, once feared, now tamed, burned in the center of them all. Aina stood and raised a stick toward the stars. The children copied her, giggling. Then they fell silent as she struck 2 stones together. Spark, flame, the light reflected in their eyes. Obi looked up at her. Where does fire come from? He asked. Aina looked to the stars. From the sky, she said, and from the ground, but mostly, she added, pressing a hand to his chest, from in here. Generations passed, and stories changed, but always, around the oldest trees, they spoke of time before fire and the girl who heard the stones speak. They carved her name into bark. They marked her path with symbols. They lit flames in her honor when children were born or when the rains returned. Aina became not just a name. She became memory, and the fire she carried walked on,